Hey everyone, this is Luke, and this is the pilot episode of the Alcove podcast. I'm really excited about this. I know we've been in the works for this for a very long time.
Yeah. Hi everybody, I'm Rachel. I know a lot of you guys know me because I've been doing the social media for the Alcove. Like Luke said, we've been working on this for months. I know some of you guys have actually reached out to me and been like, hey, when is the pod going to be available? So this is going to be our first episode. Bear with us because it will be kind of rough the first go around, but we're going to live and learn. So we got a good show for you tonight.
Everything's a work in progress, right?
Yeah. But especially Luke.
Yeah, especially. So we're going to be talking about not two. We might be talking about a few different things today, but more specifically the Jersey Devil and some Tuscarora lore. Yeah, so I'm excited about this. Anyway, so the Jersey Devil, right? So it goes, essentially the story goes like this. And I had slides pulled up, but like I said, this is a pilot episode.
Some rough
Things
stuff.
are a little shaky. All my slides somehow got deleted, but it's whatever. We'll have them next time. Anyway, the Jersey Devil is one of those cryptids that is one of the most famous North American cryptids that there is.
But I feel like while it's famous, like there's not a lot of specificity. Like people don't really go into detail.
Well, it's not that they don't go into detail. It's that all the details are wrong, and all of them are very different. Everyone is differing. Everybody you've ever talked to that has ever had. A lot of people you talk to have never had an experience, but the people who claim to have experiences, a lot of their experiences are different, and the details are different. And that when they give a characteristic of the beast, it's different. It's usually different. Like everybody talks about it being winged. Everybody talks about it being very tall. Everybody talks about it having horse hooves and a horse head and like horns, and it's just wild stuff, right? And then you hear other people say stuff about how it's not tall. Then you hear other people say it doesn't have wings. Then you hear other people say just so many different things.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people get the Jersey Devil and the Mothman mixed up.
Yeah.
And there's like this whole PBJ of Mothman and the Jersey Devil just because they're from that area of the country.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of like I don't know, I think a lot of people see it almost as like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I feel like a lot of the Mothman lore is kind of leaked over into some of the Jersey Devil lore and kind of vice versa. But anyway, I'm here to tell you the original legend of the Jersey Devil and an experience of someone that I actually personally know. And that's the most accurate data I can really give you. So it goes and it starts off with a family called the Leeds family, and they lived in the Pine Barrens, and this is around 1730.
So where is the Pine Barrens?
So this is in New Jersey, obviously, hence the name Jersey Devil, and it's actually like millions of acres of just pine forest. And it's called the Pine Barrens for a reason, because it is a very barren, desolate area. Anyway, the Leeds family, they were some settlers in the 1730s, and this poor woman had 13 children. And evidently the father, whose name was Daniel Leeds, didn't have much to do with the children. And
they never do, usually.
No, usually not. You can't hit every kid. I mean, somebody's going to be left out. Anyway, so she found out she was pregnant with the 13th kid, and she was like, bruh, you got to be kidding me. And evidently she prayed one night and she said, let this child be a devil.
Okay, like revenge on the dad.
I guess. I don't know. Anyway, the baby was born a perfectly healthy, normal baby boy. Until it started, according to the legend, morphing. And everybody has, and this is what, doing this research for this was so frustrating, because all the legends are different. All the origins are different.
Because there's those 13 kids. They all have a different opinion.
Yeah, so anyway, everybody who tells the original story leaves out details or completely changes the story. So what I'm going with is the most common, well-accepted original theory, right? So anyway, like I said, it was frustrating. So this is the most commonly referred to origin version. So he's born, everything's fine, and then not long after, it starts morphing, and it grows very quick, and it starts turning really dark, and it sprouts wings from its back, and its head starts distorting and turns into like a horse head, and it starts to grow hooves and wild stuff. Anyway, it grows so quickly that all of a sudden, boom, it's just big, and it springs into some room in the house where the midwives are, and kills the mother and the father, Mrs. and Mrs. Leeds, kills them, kills one of the midwives, and then kills like a couple children and flies out the chimney.
As one does.
Yes. Anyway, I don't believe that is the actual origin of the Jersey Devil. I didn't actually believe in the Jersey Devil until my mind was changed, but we will get to that. Anyway, evidently, since the 1730s, it will actually go in spells, and people will see it and they won't see it. Mm-hmm. And it will come in like spurts where the sightings will be crazy and then nothing will happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of the sightings happen around the perimeter of the Pine Barrens. It's almost like it's patrolling a territory.
Yeah.
And there was, I think it was in the 1800s, there was like one, it went crazy. So there was two pretty important people that saw it. One of them was Napoleon's older brother.
Okay.
He owned an estate in the Pine Barrens.
Napoleon's brother was in Jersey?
Yeah, so after he was king of Spain, and while Napoleon was doing Napoleon stuff and got evicted to one of the islands, it was kind of a turmoil spot for him. So he actually came to New Jersey and actually bought a estate in the Jersey Pine Barrens.
Okay.
So he saw the Jersey Devil and actually tried to hunt it. And that's a wild story. That's something y'all can look into more. It's a little weird. They even still say his quote unquote ghost is still hunting it, and you can still see his ghost hunting the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
It's wild. So after he saw it, he was like struck with fear, but it was like, oh wow, I want to add this to my game collection. And according to him, yeah. So anyway, so then he started hunting it, and blah blah blah. The rest is history there. But in the 1800s, there was another man. This was during the War of 1812, and he was, I think, a commodore. He was in the Jersey Pine Barrens, and they had a whole bunch of cannons. And the Jersey Devil appeared in the bushes, and according to legend, he shoots it with a cannon, and the cannonball passes right through it and doesn't even affect it.
It's almost like a phantom. Yeah,
essentially. So I personally believe that it is something completely spiritual, but that's, like I said, that's something we'll get into. He says, according to the legend, that the cannonball goes right through it. And then after this, we do know, after what this claim is, it fires up huge. Right after this happens, we have all these cow mutilations, all these animal mutilations. Essentially, it was so bad. I didn't understand this, but evidently it was so bad. If you had a small animal that was outside, or even any animal that was outside, it was turning up dead. Regardless of where you lived in the Pine Barrens, it was just, it was turning up dead. It was like nothing was safe. And animals were dying left and right. People were seeing this thing left and right. And then all of a sudden, people started seeing it flying around. And everybody claimed, and this is where a lot of the whole like flight stuff comes from, is like during this time period, everybody were seeing it. People were saying it was on top of buildings. People were saying it was just everywhere. People were seeing it everywhere. It was just like appearing, and then would just like fly off, and just like it was always gone. And most of your Jersey Devil sightings is just like only a few seconds. It's just like something
that's why it's so elusive.
It's so elusive because it's not like something that really allows itself to be in a position where it can be seen for long periods of times. It's like a blurt almost. where you see something weird. That's the main thing. So it also has something characteristics of it screams, and it has these blood curdling screams that is no other animal. Nobody can explain it. You'll be in the Jersey pine barrens and all of a sudden just hear the absolute screams. It's like a screech slash scream, according to most witnesses. So now I guess we will roll into the sighting that I heard. So I've been working with this dude for a long time who's from New Jersey. And when I started researching this, and of course, we've never had any conversations like this where the nature of it is like Jersey Devil. And I all of a sudden got in a conversation with him, and I was like, look, dude, I was like, I'm doing research on the Jersey Devil. I was like, I know you're from New Jersey. I said, just by chance, because I know there's a very slim chance of this. I said, have you or anybody else you know had an experience with the Jersey Devil? And he looked at me, he said, I have. And I was like, no way. I was like, whoa. I was like, whoa. And I knew he doesn't lie. He's not a liar. I knew he wasn't going to lie to me. So I was like, if he's telling me this, then it's real. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, okay, whoa. Like, so what happened? So he's in his 40s. And he said that when he and his brother were camping one day in the Pine Barrens, because he had land in the Pine Barrens, they were camping about a quarter mile away from the house, back in the woods. And he was 15 and his brother was 19. And they were just camped out in a tent, right? Like young boys in the late 80s, early 90s would do. So he's woke up around 2 o'clock in the morning by rustling in the bushes.
That's never good.
No, it's never good. So he peeps out the tent and sees two orange glowing eyes about 100 feet away. And he says that it's about 4 feet off the ground. And he said at first he thinks it is a raccoon, like on the side of a tree. I'm thinking, I was like, but then he was thinking, I was like, okay, where are you getting with this, right? He was like, evidently he was thinking at that point, being 15 years old, that a raccoon's eyes like glowed. Mm-hmm. So anyway, whatever, he just kind of didn't really think much of it, mm-hmm. and just kind of, laid back down, but would occasionally get up and peek at it, see if it was still there. And the eyes would move around and they would go to different areas and then start peeking again. So he was like, okay, this went on for a few minutes. He started getting a little freaked out. So he woke his brother up and he was like, there's something outside, kind of rustling around. I think it's a raccoon. I see its eyes. Let's just go scare it off. So they go out with it's a big like mag light, and they go out trying to scare it off, looking for what's out there. They start walking around. He doesn't have flashlight, but his older brother is the one carrying the mag light. So he's right beside his older brother. And they walk around for a couple minutes and don't see anything. And all of a sudden they hear something behind them. And they turn around and there's the Jersey Devil about 5 to 6 feet behind them.
Oh my gosh.
But it's not the Jersey Devil like everybody says. I'm like, okay, so I was like, okay, at this point I'm like, bro, tell me what happened. So he then goes into describing it, and he describes it as this short, about 4 foot tall humanoid. And it has little antlers on its head, about like nubs. Like, mm-hmm. He says that it is very dark. It's dirty. It's naked, obviously. He said that he couldn't tell if it was what gender it was or anything. He said he didn't see anything but the hooves or anything like that. But whenever they hit it with the light, its eyes turned blood red. And that's what everybody says about the Jersey Devil, is that its eyes are like blood red and stuff like that. Right. So anyway, they turn around and look at it. And according to him, like, they kind of like made eye contact with it for a second, because they were just like in absolute awe of what they were seeing.
Yeah. And
just turned around, and he essentially reenacted it because he's funny, but he like does this and looks at it and then is like, ah, and they turn around and run. I mean, being a 15-year-old kid, I'd probably do the same thing. So he said he got about 3 seconds to look it in the eye.
Okay.
So that's where he kind of got a lot better look at it than most people do, because he was within a few feet of it and got about 3 seconds to look at it all. He said it was extremely skinny, like anorexia type skinny, like a rail,
like a malnourished.
Yes, like extremely malnourished.
Yeah.
So anyway, they took off running. It thankfully didn't chase him. He said, I didn't realize this either, he grew up in the Pine Barrens he was in there for like 19 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only time he ever saw it. But he did hear the screams and all the other stuff too. So he's not even the type to believe in like cryptids and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he believes that, obviously he saw it, and the fact that he would even say that he saw it means in my mind that he's absolutely telling the truth. And the thing is like what this kind of now goes into my opinion on it, mm-hmm. is that I don't believe that it is a actual creature.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it's something Mrs. Leeds had that's a devil child. I believe that it's something purely spiritual. And I think that it is something that has been actually going on for a long time. And I think it manifests in many different ways.
Yeah.
That's why you have so many different people with different sightings and complete different characteristics of it. Or maybe there's a few different types of this thing in there. Mm-hmm. And, so the natives who lived in the area actually, before the settlers, anything like that, they actually called this area, the Pine Barrens, the land of the dragon.
Mm.
And you don't get a nickname, the land of the dragon, for no reason.
Yeah.
At least in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Jersey Devil. I mean, it's some wild stuff.
It just brings me back to that whole debate that a lot of, podcasters, people who are into the paranormal always have, which is, we all have opinions about quote unquote ghosts, spirits, aliens. But when we get to cryptids, I think that that's where a lot of people who are into paranormal stuff they kind of shy away from it. They're like, I don't know, because we don't have, Bigfoot poop, and we're not finding hair stuck to trees and stuff like that. And I think that, one good counter for people who do believe in cryptids is, hey, it may not just be a flesh and blood type situation.
It's absolutely,
it's a spiritual
most being. Of them are absolutely spiritual, especially when you start getting into like Bigfoot and stuff like that. And we're going to have a lot of content on that. I have my own personal experiences. It's not at all fiction. It's just not exactly in the sense of what people think it is. Mm-hmm. It's definitely purely spiritual, because so many witnesses have come out talking about portals being associated with it. They've seen it appear and wild stuff like that. But as far as the Jersey Devil, I think it's all along the same lines, where it operates outside of our material world. It can counteract with it, but I do believe it is something purely spiritual that has been going on for a very long time.
Now, speaking of very spiritual things that have been going on for a really long time, so tonight I'm bringing a lot of really interesting native lore, and specifically from the Tuscarora and Haudenosaunee people, also known as the Six Nations or the Iroquois Confederacy. Luke and I both are of Tuscarora ancestry. So we're bringing stories to you guys directly from our people.
Trust the government.
This is what happens if you trust the government. So, like our people didn't, though. Our people were cracking skulls. So we're specifically going to be talking about Tuscarora lore. I found a really great resource actually on Amazon. It was a chief in the 19th century. His name was Elias Johnson. He was a chief of the Tuscarora tribe, actually wrote down some of the oral tradition of the Haudenosaunee people and the Tuscarora. And I'm going to be reading you guys some of that oral tradition straight from his writing. And so we're specifically going to be looking at sort of the story, something called Great Father Mosquito, and part of Tuscarora lore as well. So it is going to be really interesting for you guys. But I do have a couple of disclaimers. Number one, because I am reading directly from the book, the language is very 1800s. So, but I do consider myself a pretty good reader because that's what I have to do for work. So I think you'll still enjoy it. And because there is Tuscarora language used, obviously, it's very embarrassing, but I do not my own language. So I know if there's any Tuscaroras watching out there from New York, down here in NC, we love you, we claim you. Sometimes you don't love us or claim us, but I'm doing the very best that I can, and I really hope that we'll be doing the ancestors some honor in sharing these stories. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have the text pulled up here on my phone, and we're going to get started with Tuscarora creation. So he starts with creation, origin of the continent, the animal, and the man, introduction of the two principles of good and evil into the government of the world. The Tuscarora tradition opens with the notion that there were originally two worlds, or origins of space. It is an upper and a lower world. The upper world was inhabited by beings resembling the human race, and the lower world by monsters moving on the surface and in the waters, which is in darkness. So there's two separate worlds. And when the human species were transferred below and the lower sphere was about to be rendered fit for the residents, the act of their transference is by these ideas that a female who began to descend into the lower world, which is a region of darkness and waters and monsters. And so this woman is given the name Sky Woman by a lot of the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee people. And she ends up on the shell of this tortoise, which expands into the continent that a lot of indigenous people call Turtle Island. And in the Tuscarora, it is Yawanuk. And one of her children that she had was Gatagara Quast, or the good mind. And then on the other hand, there was Gatagara Sin, or the bad mind. And these two principles were at variance, and they, were at odds for, the beginning of creation. And, a lot of this creation story kind of mimics that of what we know from Judeo-Christian culture, from other cultures throughout the world, where there were days of creation of land and animals, fishes, reptiles. But one of the earliest traditions that we have from the Iroquois people is as follows: that a company of Aguahonia being encamped on the bank of the river, where they were invaded by a nation few in number, but who were great giants, called the Ronagwaka. And war after war was brought on by personal encounters and incidents with these giants, between warriors one-on-one and between the tribe. And the giants carried on with cruelty and viciousness, and they were delivered at length by the skill and courage of Yatatante, who, after retreating before them, raised a large body of men and warriors and defeated them, after which they supposedly went extinct. But we know later on in the oral tradition that's not true. And next, they suffered from more malice and problems, and they were really dealing with these giants in, more cases. And so this was an age of monsters for the Tuscarora and the Haudenosaunee people. And the men who would go out hunting, they would, be hunting to provide for their people, to look after their people. And sometimes they wouldn't come back, not because they had an encounter with a wild animal or something happened to them, an accident, but because they were taken away or killed by one of these giants. So, as I'm looking at the text, what's really interesting to me is, it talks about how not only were the Tuscarora influenced by and hurt by these giants, but the entire Six Nations. And in fact, part of the reason that the Tuscarora folks actually came from New York, because originally Tuscarora were in New York with the rest of the Six Nations, and they actually ended up here in North Carolina for a period of about 900 years. And part of the reason that they made that trip was because they were led this way in an effort to leave the giants behind.
And see, there's actual archaeological proof of this.
Yes.
There's like so many people see this as something just lore or stories or anything like that. But over the course of 300 years, there have been thousands upon thousands of giant skeletons excavated in the mainland United States.
Yes, and actually, yeah.
So, and there's a lot of them from northern areas from whence it has been known to be excavated for giant skeletons. It's absolutely insane. A lot of people don't realize this, but there have been some very notable giant skeletons found. So they found like some 20 some foot tall people in Germany. I think one of the craziest findings that we have record of is the Carthaginians at around 200 BC found two 35-foot tall skeletons. And that's as tall as a house is.
That's crazy.
That's as tall as a 2-story house. I mean, a 3-story house. It's wild, yeah. So it's not nothing. It's nothing that is just story. It actually has archaeological evidence to back it up.
Yeah, and so basically, when the Tuscarora arrived in North Carolina, they ended up living on the banks of what we now call the Neuse River. And while they were there, they were not only being attacked. This is his favorite part. I feel like some things in life never change, and this is one of them. Not only were they being attacked by these giants, but they also encountered a being that is known as Great Father Mosquito.
Imagine having so many mosquitoes. There's literally a cryptid, of a mosquito.
Yeah, that's all you need to know about where we live. But anyway, so it was this huge mosquito, and they describe it as it was the size of a bear. And, it was hauling off with people. It was killing the warriors. They would try to fight it and kill it, but, they were unsuccessful.
What if it was the Jersey Devil they were coming in contact with?
It was really the Jersey Devil.
And saw it as a giant mosquito.
Yeah, that's what it really was. But anyway, eventually they were able to rally with the help of the holder of the heavens, the great spirit for the Tuscarora people. And they were actually able to kill Great Father Mosquito, who also not only attacked people along the Neuse River, but he would make trips up to New York and attack our relatives up there as well, because he just was.
So he just really did not like
bad like that.
He really just did not like the Tuscarora.
No, and he was not about the Haudenosaunee people. So anyway, eventually he was killed, but there was something unfortunate that happened when he was killed, because from his blood came millions and millions of tiny mosquitoes, and that is where we get those little bloodsuckers today. So we can thank Great Father Mosquito when we're having to buy our off in the summertime. Yeah. But in addition to that,
imagine hating somebody so bad you travel up and down the East Coast killing them and eating them, and then whenever they finally kill you, just release a plague on them for eternity. That's some hater stuff, dude.
Yeah,
that's just hater.
Yeah, wow. Bro. And I think it's also really important to mention that during this time, the people were being led by a man named Hiawatha. And Hiawatha was bad. Like, I think that there's a really terrible misconception that, that comes from Disney, because there's this horrible racist cartoon of little Hiawatha. Hiawatha was a warrior, man. Hiawatha was goated. So, and we can get, into more of some of those legends at a later time, but he's the one who, was the peacemaker. He united all the different tribes, and helped create the Confederacy that we know today up in New York. So, yeah.
I think that the Giants thing is something that people really need. Well, let me talk into the mic because I'm sure y'all can't hear me. I think the Giants thing is one thing that a lot of people need to look into. It's a very interesting topic. There are giants that are found all over the world. History will tell you that they're not real. Mainstream science tells you that it's not possible. They claim that the skeletons that have been found were very rare cases of what is the thing that giantism. They say it's very rare cases of giantism, but I mean 12, 13 feet tall is a little interesting.
These giants were not only just giants, they were cannibalistic.
Yeah, I mean there's tales from all over the world of the whole cannibalistic giants. I mean, I personally believe it goes back to the Genesis account of how it talks about their creation and how that kind of happened.
Yeah.
I think that a good term for them would be what it's called there is Nephilim. They're all over the world, and I think it's something that really a lot of people need to look into.
And also what's interesting about these giants is the Shawnee people actually also have tales of this same people group, if that's what you want to call them. But there is kind of another side of the legend that goes, as the Tuscarora people were traveling from New York to North Carolina, that they came upon the Mississippi River, and the band of travelers split into two groups, and one continued down to North Carolina, and one went across the Mississippi and was never seen or heard from again. And then, so there is some talk and some oral tradition that these giants actually came from these people that crossed the Mississippi River and bred with star people. Whatever you believe that the star people are. And because they were cut off from the tribe and the rest of society, that's kind of when they developed these bad qualities of being a cannibal. So, they sort of started, it sounds like, based on some of the accounts, not just of our people, but from the Shawnees and others, that they were just kind of a problem. And what's interesting is, going back to some history, during the Tuscarora War of the 1710s, when the Tuscarora were in battle with the British, what was interesting is our people made a fort when we were fighting them. And the British were kind of taken aback by this, because what they knew of traditional native warfare was it was like a hit and run kind of thing. We weren't really into forts and stuff like that, fortifying our villages in like a European sense. But they found that the Tuscarora people were doing this. But when you go back to the lore, the Tuscarora and Iroquois people were making forts forever to protect themselves from the giants.
Yeah, so that's how they knew.
That's how and why they were doing it. So there was ancestral knowledge as to how to fortify yourself.
And I mean, a lot of the oral tradition is not something that there's no, like grandfather mosquito.
Yeah.
It's a good chance it probably wasn't actually what happened. Yeah. But the thing is what you have to look at from these perspectives is what do we know that is actually backed up, archaeological, scientifically, everything. Mm-hmm. Giants are absolutely backed up, everything 100% exactly with oral tradition. And the thing is that's wild to me, right, is according to oral tradition and these giants, we're talking about 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
That's not a long time ago at all.
No. Not in the grand scheme of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a long time at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, that's like...
Yeah.
It's really not long ago. I mean, we're talking about giants. We're talking about like people 15, 20 feet tall just running around doing crazy stuff. Only 1,000 years ago. That's wild.
And what's crazy, too, is, we can actually make a connection back to the Lost Colony, which could be a whole episode in and of itself. But so these giants, by a lot of tribes, were described as being tall, obviously, pale, and they had red hair. So they looked and were set apart from the native people. And so when the Lost Colony originally arrived in, 1587, the oral tradition of the Tuscarora people that were here at the time was that they originally, in their encounter with the Lost Colony, that got lost was they actually attacked the colonists, killed the men, and took the women and children as captives, with the exception of the women and children who had red hair. Because this is a reminder, something that is reminiscent of the giants.
So I did find out something very interesting, and it's a little stereotypical and a little racist when you look at it from a white perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it from an actual native perspective, it's actually very interesting the way this is put together to me.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the legend and the skeletons that have been found of the giants, they had 6 hands, 6 fingers, and 6 toes, and your red head and stuff like that, right? So do you know where like the whole like in Hollywood movies, like how and stuff like that? So a lot of times, so what actually did happen is they would actually greet white people as that way because they wanted them to hold their hands up, and how, meaning how many fingers do you have?
Okay.
That's where that actually came from. They wanted to see
Really?
how many fingers they had, so they didn't. If they had the 6 fingers, then they were cannibals.
Well, I could see them holding the hand up, but I do know that how comes from the Lakota language.
Okay,
so that's probably fiction.
That could be
but
fiction.
I can see you holding your hand up, being like, "Hey, are you?" You know, so maybe when our ancestors first saw these pale people, they weren't just like, "Wow, who are these people and why are they here? Where did they come from?" Are they somehow related to these gigantic figures?
Well, because the giants were white, right? I mean,
they were pale.
So you see another person that's white, maybe a little bit shorter.
That makes sense.
I'd want to see how many fingers they had on there.
Yeah, like is your dad out there somewhere? Is he coming to, crush us under his feet?
And maybe they didn't even think they were giants, but they just associated, most likely, pale or white with cannibalism.
Yeah.
So that could have been why. And they associated the 6 fingers with cannibalism also.
Well, interestingly enough, we know that there was some cannibalism that took place at Jamestown. So maybe they weren't far off.
Yeah. The Donner Party.
Yeah. And the settlers keep eating each other, man. Yeah. What are we going to do?
Yeah. So anyway, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I'm good. That's what I have for the show tonight. And I really, I want to thank you guys for listening and tuning in, and we're going to continue to get better at this and get more polished and try to figure out some of the technological stuff. So please bear with us, and things will get better over time.
Next week we'll have an intro and an outro. So yeah, but as for now, it's going to have to be peace.